subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.
My name is Walter H. Blake, but no one says that H anymore. Not that anyone says my name at all these days. Once, I was Professor Blake, Chair of Philosophy at Wexler University. Author of 3 books. Invited speaker. I stood behind podiums and made rooms full of restless young minds go silent, not because I demanded it, but because they wanted to hear what I had to say. Now, I'm the guy in the corner booth at McDonald's who nurses one black coffee for 2 hours, just to feel like I still belong in the world. I'm 74. I live alone in a small house on the edge of Springfield, Missouri. It used to be filled with books, voices, laughter, arguments about Nietzsche or the ethics of war. Now it's filled with silence. Not the kind you meditate with. The kind that lingers like mold. My daughter, Allison, moved to Denver. Married a tech guy. They have 2 kids, my grandsons, Max and Eli. I haven't seen them in 3 years. Last Christmas, I got a text that said, "Merry Christmas, Dad. Hope you are doing good." You are. As in, you are. I used to grade essays for grammar. Now my life gets condensed into a lazy abbreviation. I wasn't a perfect father. God knows. I missed a few birthdays because I was lecturing in Boston, or locked in the study working on the ethics of intention in modern democracy. But I paid for her college. I helped her buy her first home. I walked her down the aisle. And when my wife died, I called her crying. She didn't pick up. When she finally called back 2 days later, she said, "I just don't know what to say, Dad. I'm not good with emotions." I said it was okay. I lied. Last week, I went to the hospital. Blood pressure's been dancing up and down like a drunk on a trampoline. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours. The young nurse looked up at me like I was some kind of rotting sofa left out on the curb. "Did you make an appointment online?" she asked. "I don't really do online," I said. "Flip phone." She sighed. Sighed, like I had personally ruined her day. I wanted to say, "I taught people like you. I shaped minds. I helped students escape poverty with knowledge." But I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Took the clipboard. Sat back down. You see, I used to believe in reason. In discourse. That truth, even if inconvenient, always found its way. But now I sit in this house with my books and old photographs and wonder what it was all for. They don't call. The students don't visit. The university replaced me with someone younger, cheaper, who wears sneakers with blazers and says things like, "learning ecosystem." But I'm not angry. I'm watching. Because I know something they don't. I know that silence is not weakness. That sometimes, the deepest cut isn't a scream, it's absence. And when the time is right, even a forgotten man can leave behind something unforgettable. I didn't shout. I waited. And I'm still waiting. There was a time I couldn't walk across campus without someone stopping me. "Professor Blake. What did you think of Chomsky's latest?" "Sir, your lecture on ethics last semester, it changed me." I remember one day, standing in front of my intro class, 200 kids in a stadium room, restless, checking their phones. I wrote 2 words on the board. What if? Then I asked. What if the truth isn't comfortable? Would you still want it? The room went quiet. Phones dropped into laps. Eyes locked in. That's when I knew I had them. Not by force, but by curiosity. That was me. That's who I was. I used to come home late, shoes soaked from slush, arms full of ungraded essays. My wife, Sarah, would be waiting with her usual sarcastic grin. "Saved any young souls today, Socrates?" I'd kiss her cheek. She smelled like lavender and black coffee. Always. We had our battles. She thought I buried myself too deep in other people's children while missing moments with my own. And maybe she was right. But I believed, no, I knew, that what I was doing mattered. Education wasn't just about degrees. It was about lighting something inside people. A kind of quiet rebellion against ignorance. I remember when Allison brought home a report card with straight A's and a note from her teacher. She debates like her father. I was so proud. I told her she could do anything. She rolled her eyes and said, "Ugh, Dad. You're so dramatic." But she smiled when she said it. Then came retirement. They threw me a ceremony, flowers, cheap wine, plastic-wrapped cheese cubes. A few speeches, a few tears. I still have the plaque. In gratitude for 34 years of service. Gratitude. What a word. It fades faster than ink on a certificate. In the months after I left, the emails stopped. Students moved on. Colleagues I mentored published books, never mentioning me. And the university I gave my life to didn't even call when Sarah died. That winter was cruel. I spent Christmas alone, eating a microwave dinner, listening to voicemail recordings from years past. One of them was from Allison. She was 10. "Hi, Daddy. I love you. I made you a card and Mommy says I can give it to you when you get home. I played it 5 times. The thing about being invisible is, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like someone flips a switch. It's more like a slow fading, a steady erosion. First, the phone rings less. Then you stop getting invited. Then people start talking around you, not to you. Until one day, you walk into a room, and no one notices you walked in. I go to the park sometimes, just to hear noise. To feel part of something. Even as a ghost. I sit on the bench by the duck pond. There's a young couple that passes by, probably college kids. He wears earbuds. She scrolls on her phone. They walk right past me like I'm a piece of landscaping. But one day, she dropped her phone. It landed at my feet. I picked it up, handed it to her. She didn't even say thank you. Just a glance. Like I was, nothing. That night I went home, turned off all the lights, and sat in the dark. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was waiting, for something I couldn't quite name. And then I heard it, like a whisper in my mind. "You're not done, Walter." It didn't come from bitterness. It came from clarity. They think they buried me in silence. But what they don't know is, I've spent my life teaching people how to see. And now, I see more clearly than ever. It happened on a Sunday. The kind of Sunday that feels too still, like the whole world is asleep without you. I woke up early, 6:12 a.m., like always. Made my usual black coffee, sat in the armchair by the window, and watched the wind tug at the dead leaves. That morning, I felt something electric. Like maybe, just maybe, I'd hear from someone. It was my birthday. 75. 3/4 of a century. Back when I was still teaching, students would bring cupcakes. Colleagues would take me to lunch. Sarah would bake that absurdly sweet cherry pie she knew I secretly hated. But this time, there was no pie. No card. No knock on the door. The mailbox was empty, except for an ad from a funeral home. Plan ahead. Save your family the burden. I checked my phone at least 20 times before noon. Nothing. Then, at 2:46 p.m., a text buzzed in. "Happy birthday, Dad. Sorry we're swamped with kids. Love you." That was it. No call. No photo. Not even a punctuation mark that made it feel human. I stared at the message for a long time. I thought of replying, but my fingers didn't move. Instead, I opened the drawer beside my chair. Inside was an old photo of Allison, maybe 6 years old, chocolate ice cream on her nose, missing one front tooth. We were at the county fair. She had climbed on my shoulders and yelled, "My daddy is a genius." I'd laughed until I cried. I hadn't thought of that day in years. Now she didn't even have time to call. Later that afternoon, I decided to walk to the university. I hadn't been back since my retirement. I wore my nicest blazer, the one with suede elbows. The one Sarah always said made me look like a real academic. It was a long walk, longer than I remembered. My knees complained, but I needed to see it. To prove to myself that I had been someone. When I arrived, I stood at the edge of the quad, watching students rush between classes, earbuds in, backpacks swaying. No one looked at me. Not one face recognized me. I walked up the old stone steps to the philosophy hall. My name had once been engraved on the door. Dr. Walter H. Blake, Department Chair. Now, the door was painted over. A new name. A new plaque. A younger man. I stepped inside the building. It still smelled of books and overbrewed coffee. I wandered to the faculty lounge. A few professors were inside, chatting over sandwiches. I recognized one, Thomas Langley. I had mentored him years ago, helped him through his dissertation on postmodern ethics. I smiled, raised a hand. He looked at me, not with recognition, but confusion. As if I were a lost janitor. "Can I help you?" he asked. I hesitated. "Thomas. It's me. Walter Blake." He blinked. Then gave a tight, polite smile. "Oh. Of course. Sorry, you looked different." Different. That word stuck in my throat like a bone. He didn't offer a seat. Didn't ask how I was. Just looked at me like I was a relic. A shadow of something no longer useful. I walked home slowly. The wind bit through my coat. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't eat. I just sat in the dark. And I felt it, not anger. Not grief. Disappearance. Like I was dissolving. But just as that feeling crested into despair, something inside me flared. A voice I hadn't heard in a long, long time, my own. "They've forgotten you. But that doesn't mean you're gone. They buried you in silence. But you taught people how to speak." And right then, I made a decision. I would not vanish quietly. No revenge. No anger. No outburst. I would do what I've always done, speak truth. But this time, I wouldn't need a lecture hall. They ignored my voice. Now, they'd feel my absence. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't need to. Something had shifted, not in the world, but in me. For months, maybe years, I'd waited for someone to remember me. But now I realized. I don't need to be remembered. I need to remind them. Not with rage. Not with guilt. But with something they couldn't ignore, couldn't explain away. The next morning, I went to the attic. My knees screamed, but I pulled down the old ladder and climbed anyway. Boxes. Dust. Cobwebs thick as curtains. And there it was. A black leather briefcase. Cracked. Worn. Inside, my original lecture notes, yellowed and marked with decades of scribbles. Handwritten letters from students. Commendations. Old press clippings. At the very bottom, a copy of my last published book. The Silence Between Words, Ethics in a Fading World. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside the cover was a dedication. To Allison and Sarah, for always listening, even when I didn't speak. That line hurt now. But it was the kind of pain that sharpens, not breaks. I took the book, closed the attic, and sat at my desk. I spent the next 3 days writing. Not a letter. Not a confession. A paper. The kind of essay that once got passed around academic circles like wildfire. But this one wasn't for journals. It was for the world. It was titled, "What Happens When We Discard Our Elders?" In it, I didn't complain. I didn't accuse. I told the truth, plainly, powerfully. About the slow erasure of those who came before. About how we take knowledge, warmth, and experience, and repay it with silence. About a society that confuses youth with value and age with waste. But I didn't write it from bitterness. I wrote it with precision. Each paragraph was a scalpel. Each sentence a mirror. I quoted Aristotle. I quoted my students. I even quoted Allison, back when she was little. My daddy is a genius. And then I ended it with one line. If you've forgotten someone who once lit your path, ask yourself what that makes you now. I emailed the piece to a former student, now an editor at The Atlantic. Didn't ask for favors. Just attached the file, and wrote. Thought this might be of interest. Walter Blake. I didn't expect a response. But it came, fast. He called the next morning, almost breathless. Professor Blake. Sir, this is stunning. I want to publish it immediately. I paused. Let the silence hang. Then said. Do what you think is right. The article went live within 48 hours. And something happened. My inbox flooded. Former students. Colleagues. Strangers. I remember you. You changed my life. I had no idea you felt this way. There were podcasts. Radio shows. Even a TV interview request I turned down. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible. But more importantly, people like me weren't invisible. Then, something else happened. A knock at the door. I opened it. There she was. Allison. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. But her eyes, those eyes were still mine. Dad, she started, voice cracking. I read it. I didn't know how much I didn't know. I didn't say anything. I stepped aside. Let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Sarah used to pour coffee and roll her eyes at my long-winded stories. Allison didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked at me and said. I'm sorry I disappeared. I took a breath. Then another. And finally replied. You didn't. You just forgot I was still here. That night, after she left, I stood in front of the mirror. Same old man. But something was different. I didn't look forgotten. I looked like a man who had made them remember. And I wasn't done yet. It's a strange thing, being remembered. When you've been forgotten long enough, even a whisper feels like a spotlight. After the article spread, and oh, it spread, I got calls from places that hadn't uttered my name in years. The university, for one. A woman named Dana Caldwell, new department head, emailed me personally. She said they were deeply moved by my essay. That my words had sparked necessary conversations. She invited me to speak on campus. Not just a guest lecture. A keynote. She wrote. We'd be honored to have you back, Professor Blake. Your legacy still lives here. I almost laughed. Legacy. They painted over my name. I didn't say yes right away. I sat with it. I drank tea from the same chipped mug I'd used for 15 years. I stared at my bookshelf, where my own name sat quietly beside Plato and Baldwin. Then I called her. MS. Caldwell, I said, I'd be willing to speak. But only if I get to choose the topic. She agreed without hesitation. So I sent her the title of my lecture. The Price of Silence: What Happens When We Stop Listening to Our Elders. The day of the talk, I wore the same suit I'd retired in. Pressed it myself. It still fit, barely. I arrived early, of course. Old habits. The lecture hall was already half full. By the time I stepped on stage, every seat was taken. I stood there for a moment, looking out at the faces. Students. Professors. Alumni. Strangers. And in the back row, Allison. She met my eyes. Nodded once. I didn't use slides. Didn't read from notes. I just spoke. I told them how silence feels. How dignity slips away not in grand betrayals, but in everyday indifference. I told them the difference between being old and being obsolete. I ended with this. You will all grow old, if you're lucky. And when you do, remember this. A society that forgets its elders will forget itself. The room stood. Not immediately. Not politely. But slowly, like they were realizing something heavy and real had just landed. It wasn't applause. It was acknowledgement. In the weeks that followed, invitations poured in. Radio. Panel discussions. Even TED Talk requests. But I didn't accept most of them. I wasn't chasing relevance. I was setting boundaries. You see, I wasn't waiting anymore. Now they were. One afternoon, Allison called. Not a text. A real call. Dad, I've been thinking, she said, about everything. The past. Mom. You and me. She paused. I could hear her take a breath. Can we try again? There it was, the thing I'd longed for. But the difference now? I didn't need it. I wanted it. And I chose it. Yes, I said. But we go slow. We talk honestly. No more silence. She agreed. And for the first time in years, I felt something in my chest ease. Not triumph. Peace. That night, I made tea. Opened the window. The air smelled like rain and wood smoke. And somewhere down the street, a wind chime rang softly. I wasn't back. I was different. They had tried to erase me. But I had taught the world how to listen again. Not with shouts. But with stillness that demanded attention. I no longer wait by the phone. I don't count the days between visits or reread old voicemails, or stare out windows hoping for someone to remember I'm alive. Because I remembered myself. And that was enough to change everything. I still live in the same small house on the edge of Springfield. Still make black coffee. Still walk to the park, even when my knees grumble like old engines. But now, when I sit on the bench by the duck pond, people stop. They sit beside me. They ask questions. They listen. Sometimes it's students, curious, sincere, respectful. Other times, it's younger parents. One woman told me her son had printed my essay and taped it to his dorm wall. He said it reminded him that wisdom has wrinkles. That made me laugh, deep, from the chest. The kind of laugh I hadn't had in years. Allison comes over every Sunday now. At first, it was awkward. Like trying to speak a language we both forgot. But little by little, the pieces fell back into place. She brings Eli and Max, my grandsons. They're curious boys. Loud, messy, funny. Eli asked me once. "Grandpa, were you famous or something?" I looked at him and said. "Not really. But I mattered." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he didn't. Maybe someday, he will. I declined another invitation last week, some high-profile roundtable about aging and dignity. I said no. Because I don't need to fight for attention anymore. The fight is over. I won. Not by raising my voice. Not by demanding anyone look at me. But by showing them what they missed when they didn't. That's the revenge they never saw coming. I became undeniable. Quietly. Steadily. Without bitterness. Without begging. I've learned that dignity isn't given, it's reclaimed. Not through anger. Not through tears. But through remembering who you are, even when the world forgets. And waiting, not for them to come back. But for yourself to return. Tonight, I'll sit by the window, sip my tea, and read something old, maybe Marcus Aurelius or Baldwin. Not to prepare a lecture. Just because I enjoy it. And if no one calls, that's fine. The silence doesn't frighten me anymore. I taught it how to respect me. Final note. Walter didn't just survive. He transformed. He reminded the world who he was, not with noise, but with clarity, patience, and quiet force. He didn't shout. He waited. And in that silence, he rebuilt something stronger than applause. Self-worth.